bless you. You're looking good, but your quote was gone.
Thanks. How's my hair?
You're good.
Told Steve not to mess him up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. God is good.
All the time.
And all the can go on for a while. Yeah, very good word. So, why don't we pray? If you would pray with me as the Spirit leads you. Father, I thank you for this morning. I thank you for this appointed time. I thank you for each one that is here. You are the author and the finisher of our faith. Father, I thank you for an intimate relationship where you know where each one of us are at this morning. You know what we walked through this week. You know where we've been, and you know where we're going. Father, I thank you for holding our future. I thank you for creating us with a destiny to walk forward from this day, from this place. And I pray that your Holy Spirit would minister to us this morning in a way that we leave this place encouraged and changed for your honor and for your glory. We thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. So did you guys have a good week?
Yes.
Even though you weren't on vacation, you had a good week. So it's possible that we can have a good week even if we're not on vacation. And it's possible that I can have a good week even though the circumstances around me might not have been that great. And that's where God's goodness does not change simply because of the circumstance around you. And that's where His faithfulness comes in every day, every moment, all the time. So do you stay connected with that goodness all the time? Or does your circumstance seem to affect that connection? Or maybe what's going on right next to you or coming against you, does that change God's goodness in your life? So, first off, how many of you had a really good time with last weekend with Dan Muller here? That was just a powerful word. And for me, and I'm going to be vulnerable today and share some things that, you know what, some of it's embarrassing. Some of it's even, I don't know, it's pretty revealing. Let's just say that. Because when you're vulnerable and you reveal things that happened in your life, you know what? People might take it wrong. They might hear the wrong thing. But that's okay. Doesn't change who God is. And so the message for a lack of better way of saying it, he stomped all over my toes, yet it felt good. So how's that possible? That you can be reprimanded and encouraged at the same time. You can be convicted, yet you feel energized and you don't feel beaten down. That's God. That's God working through a man or a human. And my prayer is that this morning can be such a word. Oh, I am sorry. Robert was supposed to dismiss the children, but I guess I will. My fault. I thought of it when I came up here, and then he distracted me with my coat thing. So, Sorry. The children are dismissed. When Katie walked in, I didn't even realize what she wanted. I think I must have been going down a path somewhere. So, where was I? Got that one. So, I'm going to share a testimony for me, something that happened. And yeah, it's embarrassing, but maybe it will encourage you. So many times we get together here in church, and we read something out of the Word. We know it's truth, and we realize, this is what we want to be, this is what we want to do, yet we leave this place, and then next week, about Tuesday or Wednesday or maybe even Thursday, something happens and we don't do what we just taught about or maybe even read about or heard about. Yet we know the truth, but I'm not living it in my life. And I'm going to give you a scenario like that, because if you think that it's just easy for me to come up here and teach a word and then go home and live it, yeah, it's not easier for me or Robert or anybody else that teaches than it is for someone listening. And so what I would like for my life to be is me teaching out of who I am as a son and teaching out of a place that I'm living at. Not just a word of knowledge that was really good. And this is not the same as what Tim was talking about. And what he shared ties right in with the message that I want to give. But I want to give you a testimony of what can happen in life. So, I'm not exactly sure how long ago it was, but it was only a couple weeks, might be 2 weeks. I had a fairly long week. My spring shows have started, and appointments, and a lot of stuff going on. And it was a Friday night, and Katie and I just wanted to go out with the kids and eat somewhere, relax, not have to do cooking and cleaning up and the whole thing. So we went to Dunlap, which is not far from our house, to Wings, etc. And all of us like wings, so that's a good place. I mean, if we go, depending where we go with the children with the ages that we have, the two youngest ones, their favorite is McDonald's. The rest of us, not at all. So it's pretty nice when you go to one place and we all like what they have. If we go to Taco Bell or Mexican or somewhere like that, the youngest ones are just, they are like, are you serious? It's like a spanking to go somewhere like that. So, and for us, it was, and I'm just going to tell you how selfish I can be. And I was very convicted of how every sin ties back to selfishness. And so we got in there, and the section where we were sitting, the whole place that whole side was empty. The other side, there were a couple tables that were filled. And we got in there, sat down, and our children are pretty active, so it's nice to have the little menus where they can color on, and they like if I help them play the games like the crossword puzzles and tic-tac-toe and like that. So we sat in there. The waitress was on top of it. She was out and had our drinks and our order taken, and very good time. So we're sitting there waiting on our food, and there's a group of 12 came in, And half of them sat at this table, and the other half sat at that table. 2 more guys came in, and they sat at this table, and the 2 tables down there filled up with people. And we're playing games, and I'm just going to tell you, we ran out of games, and we still didn't have food. And all of a sudden, the table of 12 gets their food. So you can imagine at that point, there's a few things connecting in my brain. And one of them is the waitress forgot to put in our order, all right? So there's a lot of different ways that we react. And mine was, it felt very warm in here. And I knew a lot of things that I could say, but I knew that I needed to just hold that thought. You know, there's different ways to process. And, you know, I didn't even need to pick up that thought or hold it or whatever. But for me, I decided, you know, I'm just going to shut down rather than make a scene. So, and I'm looking around, and the kids were like, "Dad, where's our food?" And so when the other tables were starting to eat, the waitress could see that something wasn't right, and she knew that I knew. Then she comes over and has, I'm going to say, the audacity to tell us, "Hey guys, your foods should be up anytime, Well, by then we had our clocks out and we're timing. And we waited another 15 minutes until food shows up. And by that time, Katie asked for a manager from somebody else. And I told her, if you didn't want a manager out there, then you probably shouldn't have asked him, because I'm not the type of guy that's not going to tell the truth, right? So we got our food and started eating, and I was not happy, because the waitress slaps our food down, and you could tell just the way she was acting. I mean, she was hustling back and forth, but would not make eye contact, and wouldn't say she messed up, nothing, just, you know, tries to make everything better, but does not say, you know, doesn't communicate. There's no communication. And then she avoids us. You know, gets the food there and avoids us. So, how many of you are in management or leadership? So, Robert, you're James right now. So, the manager comes out, and she comes over here to this table. "Hey, everything good? You guys doing good?" Yep. And she goes over to this table, totally avoids us, goes to this table. "Hey, how's everything for you guys?" I'm sitting right there. Finally, she comes over and she's like, "Hey, is everything good over here?"
There's a bit of a problem.
I know there were flames shooting out of my eyes at that moment. And I'm like, "What do you think?" And I asked her, "You're telling me you don't realize there's a problem?" And she starts dogging me with these questions. And it's crap. That's what it is. And at that point, I told her, actually, I am pissed. And then I told her, and I didn't say BS. I said, "I think," and I said the words. Because, for one, you could have just come over here instead of dogging me with a bunch of questions and said, "Hey, you know what? I realize there's a problem, and I want to do something about it." But instead, you put me in this position of questioning me. Dude, I didn't come here for a free meal. And she's like, "So what do you want? Like, what can we do for you?" I'm like, what are you offering? I didn't come here for a free meal. I can pay for a meal. And yeah, I agree. This is embarrassing even telling you this, but I'm telling you this so you understand that life is real for me and for everyone else. So I'm telling her, you know what? I didn't come here to get a free meal. I can afford the meal. But for me, it would be really nice if you would tell me what you're willing to do to work out this. And you can hear by my voice right now, this is the voice I was using, okay? Yeah. You guys feel like it feels tense in here. I think all of you have been in this situation before, right? Because you're on the edge of your seat and you feel tense. I can feel it in here. And the reality is, I was hot. And I was not nice. All right? Yeah, they know better, right? They know all this good stuff, but are they living it? All right? So, I mean, she starts saying she's going to take all the kids' meals off. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. Do what you got to do. Whatever. I'm not looking for a free meal. But the reality is, you bring your 4 kids out here, and you go through that whole business, and you tell me how you're doing. You come out here, how are you doing? How's it going over here? Yeah, right. You knew how it was going. It wasn't going well at all. So, the lady left. Yeah. Beaten. It was pretty. All right. So what do you think happened at my table? My 13-year-old son said, "Dad, that was too far." My 4-year-old son says, from this side of the table, he says, "Dad, you need to say sorry to her for screaming." And the first thing I wanted to do was justify myself. I wasn't screaming. Right? You see how this goes? I know you all know because it was very tense in here just a minute ago. All right. So in that moment, something happened in here. The word Tim shared was, all of them started in with the same thing, by the Spirit. And the Spirit convicted me, even though I had all the head knowledge, the whole way through I knew better. The whole way through I knew better. But when the Spirit connected inside here with my heart and spoke to me, that's where the change happened. That is where the change shifted from me just knowing what to do and not doing it to me becoming what the Word wants to produce inside of me. All right. So with that scenario, should I just end the story there? How many times do we end the relationship right there? You know what? Tim did something, and I am justified. He messed it up, and I tell him a few things. He walks away beat up. then we end the relationship there. How many times have we done that? I know you've all done it. You're human. So, I was convicted, and I knew something needed to be done. So, the waitress did not want to come to my table anymore. And I hadn't even talked with her. Didn't say a word to the waitress, yet she would not come to our table anymore. Do you think she knew who she was? Do you think she was secure in her identity? Like she never came back after she knew that the manager was out. I never even talked with the waitress. I didn't say one negative word to the waitress. I find that interesting. You know, that in that relationship, even though nothing was said, the two people never talked. That relationship's not going to go anywhere. Promise you. That relationship will never grow. How many times when we know something's not going right in church, something's not going right at work, we think a new church or a new job's going to make it better? Like we don't even talk about it. We just leave. You know what? I spent 20 years avoiding my family because I didn't know how to get along with them. I mean, I went when there was family get-togethers and I had to be there. But actually I'll tell you, most of the last 13 years, Katie is the one that wanted to go. Christmas wasn't a big deal for me, Thanksgiving, because the relationship was in one of those places where, we weren't connecting. It's not that we were fighting. We just liked each other a lot better if we weren't together. Because we couldn't communicate. We didn't know how to communicate. So anyhow, you don't want to leave. This is going to get good. Oh, it's okay. So the manager lady came back. Yeah, Chris, I'm telling the story. And she comes over and she starts apologizing. And then I told her, you know what? I want to talk about this. And we started discussing what happened and how it could have been different. And I apologized for my part of what I did. And yeah, Luke is awesome. He gets out of his chair and he comes over beside me and he's listening in and he's like, I'm sorry that my dad screamed at you. Yeah. And you know what the lady said? Your dad's a very smart man. And you know what? If I wanted a job in there, the way we left that relationship, I could walk in there and I guarantee you I could get a job with her any day of the week. I could probably get a management position instead of just washing the dishes in the back. So how you handle your mistakes is going to put you in a position for God to promote you. And how many times do we avoid that very situation because we think we failed? But God in that situation is bigger and is always good. And the situation is a setup and an opportunity for you to get a promotion. What you feel like or think like or what it might look like as failure or a mistake is an opportunity for you to be promoted. Because the person that tries to avoid that situation for the rest of their life will never be promoted. Because they don't know how to walk through it and handle it and be who God's called them to be. You follow? Are we good? So what excites me is that I can come in here and I can tell you how selfish and rude and pathetic that I acted. And I can know that because of who Jesus is inside of me, that I am righteous and I'm holy and I'm forgiven, and that thing's in the past. And it will only make me stronger to become who I'm called to be in the future. Now, how many times have we lived out of an Old Testament mindset where we believe we know what the New Testament says and that I can be forgiven and I can be promoted, but my Old Testament mindset says I'm worthy to be killed, stoned. That's what should have happened. And if you don't even agree with me and do it for me, I go home and I do it to myself. And I beat myself up for weeks, maybe months. It might be years. I know people that have made mistakes in their teen years, and they are mature adults still beating themselves up, killing themselves, taking the very essence of life that Jesus wants to put inside them and take that mistake and use it for a testimony. They are still beating themselves up, and their identity becomes the mistake instead of the life that Jesus wants to bring out of it. I'm excited that I can stand here and tell you with no condemnation on myself what I did. And I want us to be, as a church family, can we be in a place where we are who we are? And we know who we are because of Jesus. Not because of whatever mistake or whatever failure that you're identifying with. As long as you continue to identify with that mistake and that failure and whatever happened there, you're going to be in bondage. And you're going to continue to make those same mistakes. You will never be free. Jesus wants to set you free. All right, so John 15 is the chapter that I want to read, and I don't know if you guys are ready, but it's a very familiar word. I don't know that if we have time, I would like to read a lot of it if I can, but this is a powerful message. In John chapter 15, verse 1, it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. And there's going to be a few words different, but I think we can get along fine. Mine is the New King James Version. But in verse 2, it says, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. All right. So you remember that little story that I told you? I'm not very educated on grapes or a vineyard. I did landscaping for many years. I know quite a bit about pruning, but I'm not an expert on grapes. So if I misrepresent something, feel free to correct me. But if I understand grapes correctly, I have wild grapes growing in my woods, and some of these have vines that they will climb a 30, 40-foot tree, but there's no fruit on it. You know, that vine grows and it goes out. All right, so when we're talking about relationship with the vine dresser, we need to stay connected as a branch, we need to stay connected to the vine. All right? So the main vine comes up, and if you think about an orchard, you'll have a branch that goes all the way out here. And then in the spring, they cut it back. All right? The dead part comes off, but from that cut right there come out the fruit and a whole lot more branches. That's where the life comes forth. All right? So in my situation in that restaurant, that was one of those deals where the Spirit or the Word inside of me pruned me. All right? And I knew immediately that this is where the life comes out of. Because what I was operating in was that section on the outside that was dead. Okay? That was the part that needed to be cut off and thrown away. Jesus wants to prune you, and that's where for many years I believed that the pruning was, oh, if I mess up, something bad will happen to me. No, the pruning is when you make a mistake, the word of Jesus brings life instead of death. If it's producing death in your life, then yes, you are not connected and you are the part that's getting thrown out. But if it's producing life in you, you know that He's still cutting off the stuff that needs to go. All right? Does that make sense? So if you're making mistakes and it doesn't cut off and become new life, then you know you're that part that's still living in the dead part. You are not the part that is producing the new life. So that's where I'm asking that we can, as a congregation, have our mindsets changed so that we don't continue to believe that this is Old Testament, where every time that I mess up or do something wrong, that I am condemned. But that is the very place that Jesus wants to produce new life. That is where the pruning happens and the Word becomes alive inside of you. And all of a sudden, this relationship that was not working at all becomes a relationship where you get promoted. Am I making sense? Yes. And it all happens in the same, as far as the same Word. And this ties right in with that Tim was sharing. It's all by the Spirit. It has everything to do with the connection to the true vine. It's always by the Spirit. It's not by more knowledge of the Bible. It's not by another class. But it is by me with direct connection to Jesus Christ. And that's what we want, is that revelation inside our own lives during the week, so that I don't need to come here on a Sunday and get another shot in the arm so that I can make it till next Sunday. But that this thing is producing life out of me because of who I'm connected to. So are you guys seeing fruit, or in your own lives, are you seeing fruit? There's going to be time for you to share testimony, and I would love to hear what that fruit looks like for you. Because I believe sometimes we get distracted with other people's fruit. We see someone else bearing fruit, and we try to produce the same fruit. You have any idea what I'm talking about? I see the fruit in your life, Chris, and all of a sudden I feel the need, because I'm not seeing fruit in my life, I try to do it exactly the way you're doing it. Because then maybe I will see fruit in my life. That's not fruit. It's leaves. You can't duplicate the fruit. The fruit needs to be produced from your own walking and God producing that life inside of you, out of that place where you know there was a pruning and you got rid of the dead, you got rid of whatever was holding you in bondage and in death, and out of that came the new branches and the new life, and the fruit produces out of that. The fruit produces out of the new life, not the old wood. All right? So, in verse 3 it says, "You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me." How many of you spend majority of your life trying to clean yourself up? You're trying to clean up your act. You're trying to clean up your life. Or can you say, you know what? Because I'm connected with the true vine, I'm going to step forward knowing I'm clean without me deserving it, earning it, working harder to get it. But it's me just stepping out and walking forward. All right, verse 5. "I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned." How many of you are walking through a situation where a relationship or something at work leaves you feeling like you got burned? Because if you do, you can know that's the old stuff that needs to go. You shouldn't have to feel burned. You should be feeling the pruning that produces new life. You should not be feeling the death of the branch that is getting thrown away and burned. You need to walk in the new life part. All right. So, we will continue to read in verse 8. "By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, so you will be my disciples." All right, so just keep in mind that by this you become a disciple, because we want to come back to that at the end. In verse 9, "As the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love." So the connection is by the love. I want to share another little testimony of something that happened to me. So, Katie and I walked through with Robert and Lily, getting rid of a bunch of junk in our life, and we're talking with Jesus. We're hearing Jesus, for the first time in our lives. We're getting answers. All right, so they helped us get connected to the true vine of hearing answers in our own lives when we pray. And we ended up in Phoenix that winter. I was working out there, and I went through a sozo program, and it was amazing for me. Just talking with God. And for the first time, and Dan Moeller touched on this, and it makes me just, His wife all of a sudden had her eyes opened. Yeah. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Like, I get goosebumps, and I could just, because for the first time I realized when I truly saw what Jesus saw in me, it was a place of absolutely zero condemnation. I had never been in a place. I could hide. I could be by myself. Listen, I said I avoided my family. I lived in Montana, the furthest place I could get. 2 days after my 21st birthday, I moved and lived out there for a year just to get away from the stuff that I thought was condemning me. all right? All the condemnation was coming from the other people, right? So I lived out there, and I think about it now, it sounds stupid. I mean, this is major grizzly territory, these mountains. They closed this area to hiking in the summer during the breeding season because they don't want people up there. And I used to hike up there and stay for 3 days on top of the mountain. Nobody even knew where I went. Had no cell phone and would just live out there. And still I felt condemned. That's my point. There's no place you can go where you will not feel condemned until Jesus shows you how he sees you. And he takes that back. And for the first time, you realize there is zero condemnation in my life. Zero condemnation. And you thought it was coming from other people. And the whole time, I figured out it was coming from myself. I mean, what in the world? This stuff was coming from myself? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't somebody tell me that? You know what? If they would have, I probably wouldn't have heard them anyway. That's the awesome thing about God is when he speaks to you, you get it. Yeah. But when people, I can stand up here and preach to you the rest of my life. If God doesn't speak to you, you're not going to get it. It's just the way it is. I'm a willing servant, but I'm asking you as a friend, you need to get this from Jesus. All right? That's the true vine. That's the source you need to be connected to. Because when he shows you, bam, everything changes. All of a sudden, my problems around me were like, dude, they just weren't that big of a deal anymore. So what happened at the restaurant? Oops. I'm just saying, if we want to walk in such a way that we stay in that place. And I want to walk in such a way that I stay in that connected place with Jesus all the time. And this thing of riding a wave for a weekend, and yay, that was awesome. I want to be up there all the time, every day, every night, all the time. Come on?
Amen. Regardless of circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are having your issues and you hate me and whatever. I'm just up there going.
Amen.
How awesome is that? Yeah, I know it's available. And that's staying connected to the vine, the true source. When you start connecting with other people and their stuff, that's exactly what you're going to get. So how many times, and I'm going to use Dan Muller for an example, how many times do we get caught without even thinking about it? We think, oh man, I need to go to another one of his conferences and I got to be there. And we start making moves where we try to duplicate without even thinking. And this is not a reprimand. This is just a reminder to me that I got to remember Jesus wants to do the same thing through me. It's just not going to look exactly the same as it did for Dan. All right? And sometimes I feel intimidated because Dan would never do that at a restaurant. Right? But the reality is, he's walked through things, oh man. That's who he is. That's why he is who he is because of what he's walked through. It's not just because one day somebody taught him something really cool and he started doing it and it was awesome. No, the relationship between him and the connection between him and Jesus is so real that it became who he was and not just a bunch of head knowledge that he talks about. And that's what's going to attract, Tim, I'm with you, 400 people in this place packed out and we don't have enough room for the rest of them. Is when we start walking in a way that people know that my life is producing that fruit, they look at the fruit, they can't resist. But if you're just a vine with no fruit on it, it becomes hard work. And you're out there trimming and glossing it and trying to make it look good, and you continue to work and work and work, but people just want to see fruit. And you know what? So many times in our culture, we heard that that verse about fruit inspectors. How many of you have tried to be fruit inspectors, yet there's never been any fruit in your life? Come on, man. We've all done it. We think we're fruit inspectors because that's what the Bible said, yet you never produced a lick of fruit in your life. Right? How are you a fruit inspector when there's none being produced in your life? I ain't buying it. I don't want any of that. That's just a bunch of people judging each other. Come on.
Amen.
This needs to be stuff that I'm walking in. It can't be just some yippee, this is what we're going to do, and then we start judging each other, and we don't even know what it's like to produce the fruit. I'm getting to a point. Oh, man. What happens here is all of a sudden I got 4 messages, 5 messages. So, let's keep reading because I need to get to this one verse. Need to get to it. The key verse is in verse 15. Let's just go there. 15:15. Actually, I'm sorry. We're going to have to start earlier. Let's go to 12. All right. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. 13. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. In verse 14, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. Verse 15, no longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. So how many of you would like to be called a friend to Jesus? How many of you have served a long time? Probably all your life. You've been a servant. So how do you go from being the servant, and like Dan taught, and paying homage, to becoming a friend? And that's where Merle would probably tell me, that's when you don't make any more mistakes at the restaurant. Now you're a friend and not a servant. How many times do we think that way? You know, once I never make any mistakes anymore, now, I'm in friend level. How many times have we put Abraham there? That's something that just fired me up. Dan showed how Abraham didn't have any faith. In Genesis, all right? Going to, I believe, Hebrews. That was his very identity and the way Jesus saw him after he made him who he was. It was counted for him. I mean, he became the father of faith and he didn't even have faith. Yet how many times does my eye look at the mistake I made at the restaurant and think to myself, you know, if I'd never make those again, it would be counted to me as friend level. Now I'm up there with that friend level relationship. Come on. That's exactly what's keeping you from that level of relationship. Is that condemnation upon yourself is the very thing keeping you from reaching that level where that fruit is being produced in your life. So if you want to see the fruit produced in your life, you need to start realizing what Jesus sees you for instead of what you see yourself for. Because if you can't love yourself in your own mistakes, and this is something that I taught a couple months ago, you will not love the next guy next to you in their mistakes. If you hate yourself every time you mess up, and it becomes death, and the part that gets thrown away, instead of the part that gets pruned and it becomes new life, that's exactly how you're going to treat your neighbor when it happens. So we need to have our mindset changed from this thing of we're going to cut it off and throw it away and I'm going to avoid it. I say it with alcohol, drugs, whatever you're doing. We sit in church and we think we overcame those things because we avoid it the rest of our lives. No, you overcame when you walk in there and that thing does not control you anymore. That's when you overcame. You did not overcome lust by throwing it away and never seeing a woman again. You overcame lust when you look at the pretty woman and it doesn't control you. Oh, I know I stepped on a few toes there. If that pretty woman is walking in here and she's controlling you, you have not overcome anything.
Amen.
And if we get all caught up in how she's dressed, you have a problem. Come on. The problem is not her. The problem's right here. Oh, I am. I know because I overcame. That's why I can preach it. Because I was there where it controlled me. That was one of those things where I thought the renewing of the mind was remembering that I should never use bad language and I sure can't lust. And guess what became the forefront in my mind? Lusting and bad language. And the first two things that I failed in, those two things. Come on. Jesus overcame, I promise you. When you get connected to that thing will not control you anymore. You know, you might, that's what, I love this. That's what Dan said. I don't find a way to hide it anymore. I become free. Oh, come on. We come in here and we sing about being free. That's it right there. I stop trying to hide it and I just get rid of it. And I'm free. Amen. Come on, man. Come on. It's that simple. I become free because I just get rid of it and my focus is on Jesus. My eye is on Jesus. We went way off. Okay, friends. Abraham. You know, he was on that friend level. He wasn't just doing it because God asked him to do it and he's like, oh yeah, dude, I guess that's my call in life. That's my destiny. I just have to do it. No. He was on such a relationship that when God got ticked off and he said, the people in Sodom, I'm going to wipe them out. How many people do you think are there that are for real with me? I didn't read this stuff. Came down to 10, right? Started at 40. Am I right? 40 or 50. Started at 40 or 50 and, came down to 10. You guys know the story. All right? A friend level is not me coming in agreement with God all the time. When I'm friends with Ray, I might see something and I come to him and say, hey, dude, I know there's just 3 people in this church that are really serious, but can we agree that that's worth saving them? A friend level goes both ways, right? It's not just God telling me the whole time that this is what you're going to do, and you see something over here, and that's what you need to do, and then you see something over here, and then you go do that. No, a friend level is a relationship where I talk with you, and we talk back and forth. A servant level is what I just described earlier. If we're still walking in servant level, we're not going to see those fruits Tim was talking about. You might see some blessing here and there and a miracle here and there, but if you want to be the one walking on that relationship, you need to get to friend level. All right? And you're not going to do it by just duplicating somebody else's their ceremony of what they did. You're going to do it because you're talking with God and you guys are communicating. All right? You guys are talking back and forth and he's like, all right, you know what? We're not just going to nix them. And we're going to go with your plan. And I'm going to bless it. So what if that's your work? What if that's the investment that you're... Okay, I'm going to take one of my flip houses. I'm talking with God, and I'm like, God, I know I can make this thing nice. I know I can fix this thing up. I know we can do this thing. And we talk back and forth. And the agreement is not in me just, God showed me the house, and now I got to do this thing. Yay. No, that's a servant. But the agreement is we work together, and we're going to trust each other whether the thing looks like it's failing or if it looks like it's going good. We're just going to be friends the whole time, and we're not going to end the relationship because the thing didn't turn out the way I thought it would. Right? Servant level is this. You have no idea what he wants to do in your life, so you just go out and you work harder. Well, there's an opportunity for me to, clean the floors at church. So you think that's your call. And then you go and you clean floors for the rest of your life. And I'm not against doing that. But Jesus wants more than you just paying homage and serving. He wants a relationship where you guys are talking back and forth and you can actually be serving Him and living for Him at the same time that you're just giving Him ideas and talking with Him too. Did I lose you? Are we okay? All right. I believe very strongly that I don't want to be reduced to servant. I want to be a son. And a son knows what the father's going to do. Right? Right here. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all things that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. You know what that does? It stops me from living in the past. And all of a sudden, I become the person that lives in the future. How exciting is that? When you're a son, you know what God wants to do. And all of a sudden, you start living for the future instead of living out of your past. And what happens from a servant is, he knows that, you know what, the last time I had this scenario, this is how it went, so I'm going to avoid that one. And we're going to come over here and we'll never make that mistake again. But a son comes up here and remembers how God redeemed him in that last situation, and he faces it again and says, you know what, I'm good. Because I know who I am, and it doesn't matter how the thing looks, God's got me. Because we have a friend relationship. And all of a sudden, you become a person that's producing fruit when people are wondering, how in the world is he doing this? How is he doing this when other people do that same thing and it fails? And all of a sudden, you start out of a renewed mind getting ideas that maybe have never been given on this earth. How do you think John Maxwell, Zig Ziglar, Dale Carnegie, all these renowned speakers, I could list a whole raft of them. It comes from the Spirit, by the Spirit. It's put inside of them. And it's not them trying to duplicate some other program or some other speaker, but it's the revelation within them coming out and producing the life. And you know what? We need to be original. I love listening to Bill Johnson, Chris Valentin. Love it. But you know what? We could just play the DVD or, pull up YouTube and just play it. Why don't we just do that? because it needs to be us living it. Come on. We need to live it. For me, it's not good enough to just listen to it the rest of my life and never see it happen in my life. It's just not good enough. I want to go for it. Yeah. So, now we're going to get to my notes. This should be good. You guys good? Thank you, Jesus. I continue to be amazed because, you know what? I face these things that my head says, dude, this is crazy. This is nuts. It's stressful. It's whatever, challenging. It doesn't make sense. It's confusing. Yet he's always faithful. And he holds me. And then I wake up in the morning and I know I'm a son. I mean, that is awesome. You know, the very next morning after my fiasco at the Wings, etc., I wake up and I know I'm a son. If that doesn't blow your mind, you're not thinking. Because from a world perspective and a world mindset, that was a huge failure right there. You made an idiot out of yourself. But from God's perspective, it was a promotion where it produces opportunity. So, I just wanted to point out a couple points. You need to be able to love yourself in your own mistakes. All right? Because that's where he wants to bring that new life out of. And then you're going to be able to promote the next person when they make a mistake to a higher level. Ask Jesus how he views you, and look at yourself and your own life through the eyes of Jesus, not through the eyes of who you thought you were or who you always believed that you were. And then realize that you don't want to stay. And here's where I could teach a whole nother message of, if you want to get to the friend level, you know what it takes to get there? You got to walk this stuff in obedience. I mean, you can't just wake up one day and just know everything about it. But first off, you start by walking, by serving him, following him, all right? And I'm getting into Acts, all right? So the disciples started with just one simple act of obedience. He said, follow me. They drop what they had and they start following him. When they reached friend level was when he left. Because he taught them that whole time period. And you know why I say when he left? Because that's when the fruit started showing up. They went out and started preaching, and bam, this stuff just happens. Do you understand where I'm going with this? Where they reached friend level by walking in obedience from step one, all right? Did they mess up? I know quite a few of them messed up pretty good, all right? But that didn't cut them off from going to the next level, to the friend level, right? But the friend level is where you're seeing that major fruit being produced in your life, okay? I'm going to take Daniel. There's so many. I just want to point out a few. Daniel. He was raised in a setting by the king. I think there were 12 children. They were fed certain things. They were taught certain things because they're going to be the king's wise men or whatever. So he was walking in obedience. He didn't just wake up one day and become this guy that walks into a lion's den and he's like, yeah, they're not going to eat me. I mean, there was consistency, and there was a lot of obedience happened up to that point. All right? He didn't just, bam, end up in the lion's den. Moses, he talked with God. Did he mess up? Yes, he did. A couple times. But he was on friend level with God. Does that make sense? What about David? Was he identified by his mistakes? Or was he identified by a man after God's own heart? You know why? He was faithful first in he listened to God, and when he had every right on this earth to kill Saul, he didn't. Didn't kill him. Could have, and he would have been justified. How many times do you see something in someone else's life and you could call them out right there because you know it's truth? But when you're on friend level, God says to you, no, I want to talk to them. It's okay. You don't need to talk to them. Just bless them today. How many times do we walk on friend level where God gives you a word for you, and all of a sudden you thought it was for that person over there, or you thought it meant this, or you thought it meant that? Guys, we need to walk this stuff in obedience, and we need to know who we are before we start throwing this stuff around and calling ourselves friends. And expect the fruit of friends when we're still in servant level. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not against you or myself. I'm saying for myself, I want to be in that level where God showed, like Dan was saying, he walks in the subway, he sees the girl's pain, and he speaks to the pain and it's healed. All right? How many times I see something, the person says, hey, I'm sick, can you pray for me? But it's not by a revelation. I'm asking God, what do I pray for? And, dude, I don't know. Other than, I just be faithful, all right? We still continue to be faithful, and there's no judgment on each other. But if you want that next level of healing being produced through your life, you need to be in connection where God's showing you, that's it, and I'm going to produce it in you. You know what? There's going to be times where you thought He showed you and you pointed something out, and He still honors your word. You know, it goes both ways. When you say to yourself, you know what? For instance, at work. If you're convinced at work, it's all wrong, it's not for you, I need to go over here, I need something new, there's a very good chance God's going to honor your word. Or you can say, you know what, God, I know that you're going to carry me, you're going to back me up, and we're going to face this thing, and we're going to walk through it, and I believe He's going to honor that word. That's where it can go both ways. What you're speaking out, He wants to honor what you're speaking out. But that's where you need a level of relationship with Him, that the things that you're speaking out just connect automatically. And it doesn't become work, or you having to, spend 30 days in fasting to know what He wants you to do. Right? And I'm not against fasting. If that's what He calls you to do, then you do it. But you don't do it out of servanthood where you're begging Him to show you something. All right? But you should just know, because of your relationship with Him as a son, that you just know what He wants you to do. Please don't take that the wrong way. David, he walked in obedience first, all right? I mean, did you know that he was on the Philistines' army when Saul got killed? They were attacking Saul's army. If you told me in today's world that I'm going, okay, Robert and I are both called as leaders, all right? And I go to some other church, and it feels like that church is going to come in here and overtake this church, and Robert is just distraught. And he found out I was on that team. You know what a disaster that would be in today's world? We would blow a gasket. We're like, that dude is so, I mean, he can't be hearing God, right? How many times do we get, I'm just coming to a point here with the whole pruning. First off, the whole competition thing, it's got to go. Competition, gone. Come on. This is not a competition. You know, if we're worried about who's coming in here and how full it is and how many numbers and we're keeping track, I'm tired. No. What about a position? Man, I got to protect my position. We're all about, stop with the competition, guys. It's not a competition. Become who He's called you to be, and that's a son and a daughter. And then you live that thing, and you go for it. All right? Can we do that without judging each other? And that's where we want to judge some fruit from a perspective where we've, like, guys, are you serious? You've never been there. I should not be judging, this person over here from a perspective that I've never been there. I mean, sons don't do that. That's servants. That's what servants do. Servants get all caught up about, it's not fair. You know what? What he did to me. Blah, blah, blah. That's servant mentality. You know what son mentality is? There's not a competition. I'm doing awesome because God is awesome and I'm connected with Him. I'm not doing awesome because whatever said I'm doing awesome. Because when you live on that, you're going to be awesome for a day and then you're not going to be awesome. And then you're going to be awesome for a couple weeks and it's going to be a roller coaster. I pointed out a lot of them in the Old Testament, but there are so many more. But the disciples were not Jesus' servants. They walked in obedience, and they were on that friend level. All right? I believe that's where we want to be. So,
Amen.
Okay. Here's the message title for another time. Did you know that the church is called the bride of Christ? And do you think the bride might know something the other girls don't know about the future? Huh? Ties right in with this. By the Spirit. Come on, Tim. The bride knows something because they are no longer, do I call you servants. For a servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you my friends, for all things that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. I want to leave you with that. I bless you. Thank you. You guys can take your time and share. God's laying something on your heart.